One of the interesting things about our human body is that it will, at all costs, try to preserve where life takes place, meaning our head, our brain, our heart, our lungs, our kidneys, this whole portion of our torso and our brain. It will actually rob blood from our extremities, like our hands, our feet, in order to make sure that we are plenty warm in this area. So our head acts as a very effective thermal heat regulating device. If we shed head wear, we can get rid of tremendous amounts of heat. We'll just radiate off the top of our head. But if we're cold somewhere, the first way we should address it is by making sure that our head is properly covered and warm. And if our head and our torso are sufficiently warm, our body will send excess heat to our hands and our feet and our other extremities. So, fundamentally, you need some sort of warm hat and some sort of sun hat. Let me first address the sun hat situation. Up on the mountain, the staff members will be wearing red baseball hats like this, or also red hats that are insulated that have ear flaps. That's a great way to see who the staff are. I always recommend some sort of sun hat of some type, so your favorite hat, whatever it is, Seahawks, Mariners, or whatever, sports team, or whatever your favorite baseball hat is. This happens to be a cotton one. I don't particularly like cotton ones because they get sweaty and cold and then they'll freeze. I prefer lightweight nylon running type of hats that you would use for running, trail running, things like that, where they're lightweight nylon synthetic materials, low in absorbency, and they quick drying, as my sun hat. Then you need some sort of warm hat, and that can take all sorts of shapes. My personal favorite is just simply a wool beanie, a thin merino wool beanie like this is generally what I need, and my sun hat, and I'm pretty basic, and I've got it covered. Hats can be out of polyester fleece. They can be all sorts of thicknesses. They can have ear flaps. You can go with ear bands, just keeping your ears nice and warm, letting the top of your head ventilate. Also pretty popular are things like balaclavas. I'm sure you've heard of this term. That's a hat like this that is worn, covers your head, your ears, your chin. Nice things about balaclavas is they actually can be rolled up and worn just on the top of your head like a hat, like that as well, you know, when you don't want to wear it as a balaclava. They come in different thicknesses. This is a fairly thick fleece one. This is a very thin, more long underwear weight balaclava. You can get various kinds of face masks. This happens to be one that's out of a windstopper fleece. And so embedded in between the layers of the fleece is actually a membrane barrier. I find this type of face mask a lot more comfortable than, say, those neoprene ones that are popular with some folks. My most favorite product in this category I discovered a few years ago is a simple thing called a buff. This is a simple tube, thin polyester fabric tube. Right here I have it folded double, but what it ends up looking like is just a big tube of fabric, just like this. And the amazing beauty of this tube of fabric is it can be worn single layered. It can also be worn double layered. You can turn it and twist it and then wear it on the top of your head as a hat in a single layer. You can wear it double layers. You can wear it as a neck gaiter. The neck is a hard place to insulate, and so you can wear this around your neck and you can double it up. You can pull it up over your face as a face mask. What I like about it better than, say, a balaclava is that as I get this part of it wet from breathing through it, which inevitably will happen, of course, and it'll be freezing, I can rotate it to a new spot and then rotate it again. And by the time I've rotated it all the way around, generally that spot that was wet in the first place is now dry again. And it works really well in the summertime for preventing sunburn on your face, your cheeks, and your lips. So it may be a simple, silly polyester tube of fabric, but it has incredible versatility and use. And so my favorite is a thin wool beanie and a buff are my favorite winter headwear items. Along with our headwear, we need to pay attention to when the not overcast and gray and the sun does come out and it reflects off the snow, it can be very, very bright. So some form of sunglasses is important. If you go higher in the mountains and up on glaciers, you're going to want some sort of side shields on your glasses, or they need to wrap around. I particularly like these nose protectors for preventing sunburn to my nose. And I'm going to recommend a particular brand here. You go to the internet and look up Nose Cone. This is a particularly good one of those products. Brought to my attention this past couple years ago when I was outfitting some scouts for mountaineering. This is a product called Cocoons, and it's a really high quality over sunglass that costs like $40, which is incredibly affordable and goes completely over regular specs. So for people who have prescription glasses and they're looking for a great way to get some sun protection, these are quite comfortable and quite affordable. Lastly, it's not needed for winter camping, but if you're already a skier or a snowboarder and you happen to own ski goggles, by all means bring them along if it gets really nasty and stormy. This is the type of eyewear you're going to want to have. One of the most difficult things we have to try to keep warm in a winter camping situation is our hands. And part of the reason is that our hands sweat a lot. It's just the nature of our body that we're keeping our skin moist, and so hands sweat a lot. And what you're going to be doing in a winter camping situation, building snow shelters, is handling snow. You'll be using snow saws and shovels and cutting snow blocks and digging with a snow shovel and creating these snow shelters. And so the wetness and moisture that you have to deal with from the outside is just an ongoing, you're just in it, you're participating in it. But additionally, on the inside of whatever handwear you're wearing, your hands are getting sweaty and they are sending that moisture, it's being absorbed into your handwear. So traditionally we might wear some sort of insulated ski gloves or insulated mittens in this case for skiing and active use like that. Products like that work great in a day use environment, like when we go up to go skiing at the ski area or cross-country skiing. We come home, we can throw them on the hood of our dash of our car as we're driving home, or get to a lodge or our house or whatever and dry them out from the sweat that's been accumulated inside of them. When we are spending the night out, all of that moisture that's accumulated in the traditional insulated gloves freezes. And so those gloves become next to worthless the following morning, unless you have some way of drying those out. So some sort of a layered glove system where you can remove the inside insulation, wring it out, dry it out, put it into your clothing, pockets in various places, sleep with it overnight in your sleeping bag, is a much more effective handwear system or approach when you're doing snowshoes and snowshoeing and backcountry skiing and building snow shelters. So let's look at a variety of handwear that might work for that. First off on the bet is some sort of heavy-duty rubberized gloves. These are really popular with a number of the instructors in the winter camping seminar, and they recognize that their hand's going to get sweaty, but inside of this they'll wear some sort of a liner glove, and then whether that's a synthetic lining glove or a wool liner glove or some form of liner glove, inside of the rubberized glove. And this works really well for handling the snow blocks, and obviously it's totally waterproof, so you're not going to get external moisture. And they know that they can change out the inner gloves to dry them out. In terms of material choice, some sort of polyester fleece is a really good choice for our glove liners, or traditional wool. So whether you choose wool gloves or wool mitts or fleece gloves or fleece mitts, it doesn't really matter. It's whatever your personal preference is. It's nice to have a multi-layered system. So starting with some form of liner gloves. This is an example of a thin wool liner glove, or sort of a thicker liner glove out of a thin polyester fleece. Another example, this is a power stretch fleece, which is quite stretchy, quite comfortable. I'm not a real fan of the really thin liner gloves because I feel that they're kind of expensive and they wear out really quickly, as evident of the holes that are worn in this particular pair. Clearly nowadays we use a lot of electronic products, cell phones as our cameras, or for GPS or mapping. Be aware that there are gloves that have specialized tips on the finger for operating your electronic devices. In my case, I just use worn out gloves that have bare skin. But you need some sort of lighter weight handwear to manipulate setting up the tent, cooking, starting the stove, various things like that. So I kind of stay away from the really thin ones because I don't think you get a lot of value for your money. They wear out pretty quickly. My favorite glove system is some sort of a polyester mid-weight sort of fleece glove with some sort of a shell glove worn over that. So this is some sort of waterproof breathable shell glove worn over a fleece glove, and I can trade out the liners and dry, and it's just a real versatile system rather than using gloves that have the insulation attached. Now, it's a lot less expensive and easier to get over shells that are mittens. So there's certainly nothing wrong at all with using fleece or wool gloves for the dexterity that they offer, but when you need that external waterproofness, to put them underneath some sort of a shell glove or shell mitten in this case. A real handy feature is for these things to have a leash system. So some sort of a cord so that when you can have the outer shell providing that waterproof integrity that you need, handling the snow blocks, but now maybe you get to a situation where you need some dexterity and you're not going to lose it. Now, if your gloves or mittens don't have this, it's something easily added with just some cord, maybe a cord lock, and there's usually somewhere on the glove where you can simply just insert this and girth hitch it on. Quickly do this. Yeah, so I can just put this on there like that, just girth hitch a loop of fabric, and then now I have the ability to have a leash on there. I can put my hand through it. And so I'm not going to lose my gloves when I'm doing various things. I can just put this right in here like this. So things like leashes can be easily added so that you don't lose your gloves or your mittens. This is a relatively inexpensive Gore-Tex over mitt from REI that I found called the Minimalist. And it's really all you kind of need over some sort of fleece or wool gloves. So hopefully this gives you some ideas. Don't overlook rubberized handwear. What you want to stay away from, though, is gloves that have attached insulation. They just don't work all that well in a winter camping situation. One of the most important extremities we need to, of course, care for is our feet. And so I'm going to present a variety of options for solving the dilemma of what to wear on your feet for winter camping and snowshoeing. Now, the two most obvious and most important characteristics of all footwear for snowshoeing and winter camping are, first and foremost, at least in the Cascades, that they be waterproof. Our snow kind of goes from states of being light and fluffy, sometimes falling out of the sky, to coming down as sleet and hail and rain, and it goes back and forth between various states of frozen. So quite frankly, on our winter camping experiences, we often encounter wetness in terms of puddles and just wet snow. So the first criteria for any footwear is that there is a fairly high degree of waterproofness. Secondarily, of course, is we would want some sort of insulation, if it's possible, in either the footwear or footwear itself built in, or in some means of adding additional warmth in various ways. So we're going to take a look at a variety of types of footwear that you could easily, hopefully, acquire. And I'm going to go straight to one of the more unusual ones that's been available the last few decades that's quite useful and easily obtained. If you already are a snowboarder, snowboard boots make excellent snowshoeing winter camping boots. They typically already have waterproof characteristics and insulation value, and they have soles worthy of walking in. One of the other good things about them is they're easily rentable. Most area ski shops and even up at the area will rent you snowboard boots. They also, as the new ones come out all the time, year after year, people wanting the new latest and greatest pair of snowboard boots, they're selling off their old ones. So they're readily available on the secondhand market and oftentimes donated at thrift stores. So I key in right on a pair of snowboard boots right off the bat. They make excellent snowshoeing footwear. This next piece of footwear happens to be a cross-country telemark, old-school style leather telemarking boot. But I mostly am showing it in terms of the fact that it's a leather boot. So leather hiking boots, leather mountaineering boots can certainly be used. The key thing there is to make sure that they're well waterproof, that you use some form of treatment on the leather to make them well waterproofed. We derive insulation from the wool sock combination that we're going to use, and I'm going to address socks in just a second. There are also fabric mountaineering boots that have some sort of a Gore-Tex waterproof breathable insert underneath the fabric. There are leather mountaineering boots that nowadays modern mountaineering boots have waterproof breathable Gore-Tex type inserts underneath the leather. These type of boots would work well. Maybe you have what's called a shoe pack type of style footwear, or you hunt, or your father or your uncle or some relative of yours or your aunt may have a boot like this. Rubberized in the bottom, leather in the upper, so you have breathability, but you have that waterproofness. Again, you get your warmth from just wearing layers of wool socks. All fabric hiking boots, if they're waterproof, are certainly suitable as well. This happens to be a modern fabric. It's all fabric, but with a Gore-Tex insert ladder is suitable. I'm actually modeling a pair of those. They are actually, quite usable as a pair of footwear for snowshoeing. One of the most popular choices amongst most of the staff winter camping is a boot like this, popularized by a brand called Sorel, also called shoe packs. Again, in this boot, rubberized at the bottom when you're in contact with the wet puddles, but it actually has a thick wool felt liner system providing the insulation. So it epitomizes the two characteristics of waterproofness and insulation. Plastic mountaineering boots could also be a consideration because these can also be rented. So again, these can be picked up on the used market or they could be rented from places like REI. One form of footwear that some might consider I'm not as keen on is just a full rubber boot like this. The problems that I see with a full rubber boot like this is that, first of all, it doesn't breathe at all. So any sort of socks that are in here in your feet are going to get sweaty pretty rapidly. There's no place for the moisture to go. If you were able to keep any snow from entering it, it may serve as relatively well. But as soon as any kind of snow enters the top of this boot, it's going to sit in here, be held captive. Your foot's going to melt that snow. You're going to be sitting in a cold pool of cold ice water captured around your foot in something like a rubber boot. So I'm not very keen on suggesting people use rubber boots. So I hope that amongst some of these various options that you'll be able to figure out something that's going to work for you, either that you own or that you can buy from a secondhand store or borrow from friends and relatives. Now, important is a pair of gaiters, which is a fabric tube that's worn over the top of your boot, comes down over the top of a boot, is attached with a strap underneath the instep, and keeps snow from going down inside of your boots. So I highly recommend gaiters. Example of how affordable they can be, I was in REI last week sniffing through the garage sale items, and this is a gaiter made by a prominent local company, Outdoor Research, very common gaiter. Nowadays retails at an outrageous price of $89, and I picked these up for 32 bucks at garage sale. And things like this could also be made. If you have a particularly some sort of hiking boot that you particularly like, but maybe isn't quite as waterproof as you might consider, there are things like waterproof socks. So here's an example of a waterproof sock that could be worn over your regular sock combination that helps prevent moisture from getting to your feet. I don't recommend things like fleece socks for actually wearing in footwear, and the reason is that polyester fleece tends to compress, doesn't maintain its insulation value under weight. Under a lot of weight, this will just compress down, whereas wool socks will maintain their resiliency in the wool fibers themselves. Now, I don't generally want to recommend a particular store, but I wanted to give you an example of a great deal on socks. You can go to Costco every fall. They have this outdoor socks. You can get multiple pairs of these. I think now they're $18 for 6 pair. Socks similar to this bought at other outdoor stores are frequently $10, $15 plus a piece. And so buying 6 pair of these for $18 is a screaming good deal. There's another way to retain a lot of heat in a very inexpensive, easy way. And it's what we would refer to as a vapor barrier system. So you take some sort of synthetic inner sock. This happens to be a nylon inner sock. You could use even a men's nylon dress sock. And the first thing you're going to want to do is put antiperspirant on your foot to try to prevent as much sweating as you possibly can. Then you put the synthetic sock on your foot, and I'm going to just demonstrate with my hand here. And then we're going to encase that sock with a plastic bag. And in this case, this is just a bread bag. I can use a light rubber band over it just to keep the plastic bag up. And then I'm going to put my thicker wool sock over the outside of this plastic bag. Like this. And of course the footwear you're using needs to already be fit for a thin liner sock and a thicker outer sock, which is common for a lot of hikers use that type of combination already. The plastic bag takes up no space whatsoever. Now what I'm effectively doing here is blocking any sweat and perspiration from leaving my foot and reaching the outer wool sock. So it's able to maintain its dead air space and thus provide insulation. And this is a very inexpensive way of providing a tremendous amount of warmth in a simple manner. And that's called a vapor barrier sock situation. Now, you can also purchase fancy nylon vapor barrier socks that are basically just coated nylon. A little bit difficult to find from time to time, a little bit more expensive, and certainly for a single outing, bread bags are free. This is a very, very effective way of increasing the warmth of one's feet. But the key ingredients, antiperspirant first, making sure that the inner sock is some kind of synthetic sock, and a plastic bag and a rubber band. So I hope these are some good ideas for dealing with how to keep your feet warm winter camping.
Go.
Almost forgot one luxury item. If you do a lot of winter camping, you're definitely going to want to pick up a pair of insulated booties at some point. These are insulated with down. They can also be insulated with synthetic fiber fills like Polar Guard or Qualifil. But having a pair of these for wear inside the tent or inside the igloo, wearing around camp, at night is a really, really nice luxury if your feet have been in these other things all day long. It's really important if you utilize this vapor barrier system that your foot breathes through the night. Do not sleep in it overnight. It's really important that your foot has that opportunity to breathe and air out and dry out. A more obscure item that's kind of a luxury item is some sort of a fabric knee-high muckaluck product. And how this is worn is I have my down booty here, and I put this inside of this fabric muckaluck product like this, and then I can go outside the tent in the middle of the night and shovel the snow off the roof as it's falling, or leave my snow cave or my igloo. This is sufficient for walking around in camp. It's quite comfortable. It gets wet and nasty on the outside, and so when I'm done doing whatever outside chores I'm doing, I'm back inside and I want to crawl into my sleeping bag, I can crawl into my sleeping bag with my booties, my insulated booties that are nice and dry. So these are kind of luxury items. This one's fairly common to find. This one's a little more obscure to find, but it certainly could also be built, handmade, DIY. So I hope these are some good ideas for winter camping footwear.